Hey, Elliott.
Hey man,
Good to see you.
good to see you too.
Thanks for being here. For everyone joining, Elliott is a partner of Bessemer Venture Partners in San Francisco, focused primarily on growth investments in SaaS and cloud companies. Prior to joining, he was at Syncom Venture Partners, Georgian Partners, and also M12. Elliott got his MBA at Columbia Business School and a bachelor's in science and mathematics from Morehouse College. And he's also a member of the Kauffman Fellow Class of 22. Elliott, really appreciate you being here. Just to kick off, would love to hear how you're doing. Some of the biggest changes you may or may not have seen coming in this sort of work from home setup that you're starting to get used to.
Yeah, for sure. So, what I'm most nervous about is that this recording will pick up my wife, who's in our guest bedroom. She's on a bunch of Zoom calls as well. So, I think personally, that's probably the biggest change, which is moving around rooms and how do we deal with the dog walking through meetings. But luckily, just about everyone's in this situation, so they understand. My dog jumped up into my lap yesterday, which prompted a CMO to bring in his kid and his dog, who I think were like just off camera. And I think it's kind of breaking the rules of how typical meetings are done, and people are just saying, okay, screw it. The weirdest thing is, if this is like week 2 of a 3-month thing, I don't know where we'll be in 3 months. People will just be doing Zooms in pajamas and just say, screw it. But things are well, man. I can't complain. And at least the weather's really nice here. So I'm getting my walks in with my dog and trying to stay as healthy as I can.
That's awesome. So I see the Peloton in the background, and I know just from knowing you personally, you're a big rider. So love to see that you still got your setup there. Walk me through just a little bit of some of the things that you're seeing Bessemer do in particular around just communicating with the team, making sure everyone's staying on the same page through this.
Sure. I mean, I'll just say personally, one of the best parts about this remote work environment as a firm, we do believe in getting together in person and trying to communicate, but we've also really wanted to limit email over time. And since we've all been working remote, Slack has really been super active and way more active than it usually has been. I think in a world where we know we're on the early stages of this COVID crisis, it's also allowed us to be super serious in moments, but also super kind of lighthearted in moments. And people are sharing more things personally because everyone's working at home. So I've sent out pictures of my dog and like a Bessemer dog t-shirt. I've seen pictures of folks' kids and their significant others in their homes. And it's going to sound weird, but it's been a really kind of personal touch point with a lot of
intimate in a way.
Yeah, it's very intimate. I mean, most people at my firm, I think there's maybe 4 or 5 people that have been to my house for drinks or dinner. I feel like everyone's
now they've all been there.
About every part of my home, because I try to move the computer around just for my own sanity.
Yeah.
So Slack has been a big thing. We actually have our first firm-wide Peloton ride tomorrow at 1. So we'll talk about some things we're doing with our portfolio tomorrow. And then because we're all going to be on the same schedule, we have 2 big blocks where we know kind of everyone at least on the investment side will be doing the same thing. In between those things, we're doing our first team-wide Peloton ride. And we're also booking in other Peloton things, whether it's a yoga class or a stretching class or a meditation class, which is kind of cool, right? I mean, it's one of the few companies that's probably doing pretty well right now. I've certainly got a lot of friends that have signed up for the free 90-day app, and I'm streaming classes that I never thought I'd be doing. Elliott doing yoga at home was not on the list. I was primarily a bike person, but I got a lot of free time. So
love it.
And then the last thing I'll say is I think like everyone, it's got us spending a lot more time thinking about the portfolio. So in a world where, let's say 60% of my time was focused on sourcing and analyzing new deals or getting closer to companies and founding teams, now probably 80% of my time is focused on the portfolio and helping management teams solve challenges, plan for the future, a very uncertain future at that, but also just helping my partners think through common challenges and unique challenges that all of us are facing in our portfolio. So that's kind of a full circle side of the answer, which brings you back to, although I'm not seeing my partners, I'm talking to them a lot more than I usually would, where people are flying everywhere and board meetings everywhere and looking at deals. Everyone's kind of at home, and
Yeah.
I've got 3 or 4 partners I've talked to this week about unique challenges in their portfolio. I don't have a whole lot of like unique insight or anything like that, but having lived through the 08 to 2010 where flat was the new growth, I kind of remember that. And some of my partners either were doing something else or maybe, you know, experienced it in a different way. So it's been nice to get to know them in a new way as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's just talk about a little bit of that communication between investor and portfolio. You've spent many years on boards. What are the things that you're sharing with CEOs right now? And then also just tangentially, how are you getting information? What are the sources that you're looking to just sort of stay up to date or in the know?
Yeah, it's funny. I'll be totally transparent and say over my almost 15 years in venture and growth, like the proliferation of the community side of your portfolio. Most funds have like a community manager or, people that bring CMOs together, CFOs together, COOs together. I always thought it was a nice to have for most of my career, but like in a time like this, it's a really must have thing. Because a lot of these folks are seeing things for the first time. And in a world where we've got, more than 200 portfolio companies, it's impossible for us to get every question answered in context, in roles and parts of the company that we might not know as well. So, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I did an hour call with the CMO of Shopify. Now, I'm not on the board of Shopify. My partner, Jeremy, is. We've been in that company for a really, really long time. But given his experience having seen Shopify's growth and then, really important growth stories at other companies, he's very analytical as a growth marketer. And I had questions from across the portfolio that marketing experts and operators were asking me. I just started writing them down.
Yeah.
We've got this incredible community of CMOs, but even on top of that, we've got this community of EIRs where I've got a lot of questions that I don't have great answers to. Most CFO questions, COO, maybe CEO questions, I feel pretty confident on. But marketing, that's the one class in business school where I really struggled. The 7 P's and the 5 S's, all my marketing people listening to this are probably laughing because I know those are the wrong numbers. But you're in business school now, so you're probably going through it. The only marketing class I did well on was consumer insights, because then we were doing regression modeling on survey results. I can do that all day long, but kind of the softer side of marketing, I don't understand. And that's actually really important in an interesting time like this. One of my companies has totally changed its messaging on its website and its email marketing and its digital marketing for the crisis. In the world where your value prop is this big, in a crisis, you might want to slim it down to the 2 or 3 things that'll break through.
Interesting.
And that was something that the CMO of Shopify was super helpful in helping me think through. Even for them, think about them. They're serving small business owners. They're probably the first people to get hurt in a crisis like this. Their marketing messages are going to be totally different, not just to their existing customers, but their new ones. So I would say I'm gleaning most information from our community of operators, CEO and down. My partners, many of which have been in this twice as long as I have. And then our investors that here at Bessemer that were operators turned investors. So someone like Byron at the firm I talked to a lot. I think I was texting with him last night at 11:30 just about, hey man, do you remember when you were a venture-backed CEO and you faced challenges like this? How are you? It's not that the advice we're giving is different, but he's uniquely qualified to deliver those messages in a way as an operator, as a CEO and founder. So I'm even gleaning from him. So, I've got my own experience and I'm bringing that to bear, but with the extra time that I've got, I'm able to think through that feedback loop and how I'm delivering that information.
Super interesting.
More
Let's talk specifically about what sort of Jeff Epstein runs at Bessemer, the CFO kind of community. I know that's a little more specific to Bessemer. I think you guys are one of the better sort of suited firms to have sort of CFO specific credibility. Would love to hear what he's working on, or anything in particular that you're gleaning out of that.
Sure. So as you mentioned, Jeff Epstein does run our CFO forum, our CFO council. I'm not sure what the actual term is, but Jeff is who I refer to as my secret weapon at the firm. He was CFO of Oracle. So when you think about the fact that most of our investments are in software, global in nature, and mostly focused on enterprise, he's just seen it all. But he was also CFO of DoubleClip and a bunch of other companies that different business models might be more consumer centric, maybe not in their end customer, but just their business model and their ecosystem. I have spent a lot of time, our CFO council is always working, but you can imagine in the last 3 weeks, it's like the most active thing we have in our community. So, for the first time tomorrow, we're doing a CFO forum town hall. As investors, we're not dialing in because we want our CFOs, and we've opened it up to CEOs and CEOs as well, to be able to talk openly about challenges they're facing. How do they talk to people about potential furloughs, cut in pay? And then the most real cases, we're going through some rifts and some layoffs. Mm-hmm. It's just a fact. But the other thing, going back to your first question, where are we getting information? There's actually a lot of, I wouldn't even call it like misinformation or fake news. That's lazy. It's just there's a lot of information floating around on social media right now that may or may not be true. So it's a safe space for if a CFO reads something on Twitter and says, oh man, like, should I totally be rethinking my RIF planning? They can put it up in the CFO forum. Right. And then maybe there's another CFO that actually spoke to the governor's office or the mayor's office in New York or LA or San Francisco or even statewide or federal. And they say, no, I just got off the call. This is the latest and greatest. That tweet is actually 3 days old. And as you can imagine, and you've seen, news is developing in like a 2-hour news cycle online. So it's really great for them to have a safe space. And then bringing CEOs in who are going to deal with the brunt of the decisions that CFOs are kind of giving them the information to make. It's just like a really tangible way. Look, VCs are trying to do the best they can by tweeting and Medium posting. That's great, but like sometimes you just need to be on the phone. Yeah. Sometimes it's a bit therapeutic too. I mean, hitting the clap button or a heart button on a tweet or Medium post is nice, but and even typing into the comment section can be cool. But sometimes you really need to just tell someone, guys, I'm really having a challenge thinking about getting rid of 30% of my workforce.
Oh, that's a great platform.
And how do I do that? And someone like Jeff, who's seen it all, has gone through the analysis, all the questions we've gathered ahead of the town hall. I imagine we'll be doing these. I think we're talking about doing them maybe even every week to start, and then maybe every other week or every month as we go through it.
Let's talk a little bit about hiring, whether that's portfolio companies or even Bessemer and venture firms. A lot of people had candidates lined up and were excited to sort of tier in offers over the next few months. I mean, how do you maintain that? Do you push it off? Do you start over after this? Just kind of how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, this is a really unique situation that we're in. You're in business school. Luckily, you're in your first year. And you've got a different situation going into business school. But, I've talked to probably 20 or 30 candidates in the last month and change about full-time roles post-business school, as well as a potential pre-business school kind of 2 to 3 year run where I'd be delighted to get someone some experience who's really hardworking and then help them get into business school. Yeah. And the reality is, while Bessemer is one of the larger venture firms, I'd put us in kind of that larger 10% bucket that's got more than 40 or 50 investment professionals globally. Even at that scale, hiring 2 or 3 people in, it's a large percentage of your employee base on the investment side. And the average venture firm that might be a couple of partners and some junior folks, that one hire you make every year or two, that's 10% of your workforce.
Yeah.
So to try to hire that person and screen everyone out over Zoom, I happen to know you, so a conversation like this is super comfortable for me. Yeah. And I've known you for a couple of years. Most of these people I'm meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
And the idea that between now and maybe August, where we would have already made a decision, talked about, moving to the West Coast or staying here on the West Coast, not only will I not get a chance to meet these people in person, my partners and my other investment professionals and operating professionals, they might not get a chance to meet these people.
Yeah.
So that has totally changed the way that I'm thinking about interviewing people, how I'm thinking about doing case study work, how I'm thinking about trying to change questions to figure out the interpersonal side over Zoom,
Yeah.
which is really challenging. And
Super
then
interesting.
the last note on this topic is, even internally, if you're managing a venture fund or a private equity fund, you might have students that, or I'm sorry, professionals that might be ingoing students to business school or thinking about business school. That mindset might have totally changed.
Yeah.
They might say, hey, I've got a secure job here. I'm going to defer business school for a year.
Yeah.
Or for the people that, may or may not have a future at your firm, they might not have the ability to interview. So you might want to think about them a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Because if you can't bring in their replacement and then that person can't find a new opportunity, maybe they hang out for another 3 or 4 months so you have people. So it's look, let me be clear. It's nothing like running a couple hundred employee startup.
Sure.
But we've got our unique challenges too, and we're trying to be as thoughtful as possible and addressing them.
Super interesting. Let's talk a little bit about just investing for some of the VCs that may be listening. Best practices around sourcing when you can't get on a plane and get to Utah or get to New York. What are some of the things that you think will work well in this setup for you? And maybe frankly might be advantages where otherwise, it could have been looked at as a disadvantage. How are you thinking about sourcing and getting in front of founders and still building that relationship?
Sure. So totally selfishly, I've got 2 thoughts on this. One, this is like a dream scenario for someone like me. I'm focused on growth where, the volume of deals that I look at is a little bit slower than some of my earlier stage partners that are seeing a bunch of really small companies all the time. The funnel's just different as you go through different stages. And what this allows me to do, where typically I've got so many things going on, my pipeline is going to be the same for the most part as like Brad at Lightspeed. We're looking at the same batch of kind of 50 companies every quarter or two.
Yep.
I've usually been able to stretch my own limits in terms of sleep and time to find very unique ways to understand these companies and really the founding team and management. So going into a deal situation, I like to spend somewhere between kind of 4 and 5 hours really getting to know management. And that's usually virtually. So that's listening to every podcast interview they've done the last 2 years. That's looking at every YouTube speech they've given or product demo. It's allowing me to go to their website, and when that little box says, do you want a demo? Hey, I got tons of time for demos now. So I'm building a more robust kind of pre-diligence package on, let's call it, the 20 companies that I care about right now or for the rest of the year. I don't know what right now or the rest of the year really means in the coronavirus environment. But typically, being on a plane a couple of times a week in normal times, I'm listening to podcasts in airports and Ubers. The last deal I just closed, I was listening to like an hour-long podcast from Newark Airport to the meeting, which made for a really exciting conversation to start. And then, we kind of built on that. So whether it's reading people's Twitter handles, their Medium posts, interviews, presentations, reading about the company, going back through looking at how their website changed over time, which is something that most investors don't do, to understand their own marketing message and how it's evolved. I have every day kind of dedicated to 2 companies that I'm interested in. So I'm even smarter at the time when an investment opportunity might arise. I usually just don't get that time.
Yeah.
So, to your question on sourcing, like I pretty much know 2 quarters in advance the companies that I'm excited about. It's more so about, being more thoughtful going into a pre-diligence conversation. And now I'm in this, the last thing I'll say on this is I sat down with my colleague that helps with some of my meeting scheduling, and we basically 3 weeks ago said, okay, everything the next 2 months has to move to Zoom. So then in conversations like this, the ability to connect with someone more personally
Yeah.
about something they shared in an interview or during a presentation or something you saw them write 2 years ago that really stuck out. I'm in a world now where I don't have the opportunity to connect with you personally,
Yeah.
but if there's a way that I can connect with you uniquely over Zoom,
Yeah.
or maybe in a more personal way, because I'm likely going to see your significant other, or you're going to meet my dog walking around. There's some things
Yeah.
that
Oh, it's interesting.
have usually done well for me that I'm able to double down on in a time where I've got a lot.
Had Jameson Hill from Bain on here a couple of days ago, and he actually talked about shifting all of his not only coffee chats but his calls to Zooms, and really allowing himself to just continue to have that social interaction, sort of the importance of seeing people right now, seeing people smile in, and just kind of getting through it together. Last one for you. Would love to just talk a little bit. You're a unit economics guy. How do you think about forecasting revenue? I feel like a lot of people are looking at what I'll call demand resurgence optimism. It's this sense that as soon as we get out of this, everything's going to pick up and there will be a premium on top and everything will get back to normal. How do you bake in or layer in some of these changes more than just, 2, 3, 4 months down the road?
Yeah, it's a really nuanced question and response. So I think every business model has to reforecast the future differently. And I'll touch on a couple. So you can imagine, I know the things that we've talked about from investment opportunities. Vertical SaaS, to touch on one, has been an incredible investment thesis and area over the last 10 years. The problem with vertical SaaS in a unique kind of coronavirus environment is there's some verticals that are getting hammered.
Yeah.
So, as a firm that's got some investments in SaaS companies for the restaurant industry, like that is a totally different business forecast than a company that might be in data backup and recovery.
Sure.
That stuff still kind of has to be there. And if you're well vertically integrated and you've got a really deep product and value prop and disaster recovery, that might actually be a really solid business. Some of our consumer investments that touch like the event space or the ticketing space, like
reforecast.
that reforecast is probably an easier situation, at least on the top line. What you do on the bottom line, now that's a really, really hard discussion to have. But like this, at the end of the day, the unit economics that made me really excited about businesses I invested in the last 5 years, those still hold. Yeah. So gross margin payback period is still going to be my number one unit economic indicator of success. Yeah. And for me, that's just based on your business model, delivery model, COGS, how many months does it take for you to get a customer profitable? Yep. And in a world where, churn is going to increase most likely across every sector, that's even more important, because if your CAC is really high and it takes you 22 months to turn someone profitable on a gross margin affected basis, the next 22 months could be a total wasteland. Yep. And then let's say we make it 6 months out of this, and now you're bringing in new customers. Now you got to wait another 22 months to turn them profitable. Yep. So the businesses that were in that kind of 6 to 12 month range, they've just got a better situation if they are able to cut costs, keep churn relatively okay, and then to use your term, I think it was demand
resurgence optimism
or something. When the spigot does turn back on, they can start to see operating leverage in their business model quicker than your average. So that's a foray into the last nuance, which is if you're an enterprise, like a large enterprise go-to-market motion, you should probably be thinking about, what are we in? We're in March. Like 2020 is kind of done. Right? Like if it's a 6 month sales cycle, the average enterprise is it's just not going to buy right now. Yep. Now there's certain business models and value props where they still might buy. Knock on wood, my last investment closed a new deal 2 days ago. Yeah. But their value prop is actually about reducing costs in certain workflows, so that they might be well positioned. Yeah. And then the last thing I'll touch on is, the whole remote work and remote productivity. First investment here at Bessemer was in Hinge Health. And that's, it's the easier way to think about it is it's remote healthcare for MSK patients. So anything with a hinge, an elbow, a neck, a back, a shoulder. There are most of those patients see physical trainers in person.
Yeah.
They can't do that right now. So a company like that has this unique situation where it's like, oh, well, people are pulling back on what they're going to buy, but there's a whole new market opportunity where physical trainers are reaching out to the company saying, is there any way I can use your platform?
Yeah.
Because I still need to meet with these patients in order for me to get paid and submit my billing codes, but I can't do it right now. I don't have a solution. Zoom might work for them, but having, you know, a really robust thing that comes with content, a way to track, a way to bill, that's a unique model. So, you know, I think it goes from business model to business model, from vertical to vertical. And, you know, I woke up this morning early at like 6 to see Ray Dalio talk on CNBC. I just want to get a sense of what's on his mind. And of course, he's on TV, and I'm sure his hedge fund was well positioned before he said whatever he was going to say. But when he talked about 4 trillion of corporate losses in the U.S. and 12 trillion globally, I mean, you think about how that impacts your forecast if you're an enterprise software company going forward. And the last thing I'd say is I think you've got to really sit down with your management team and your board and figure out what is acceptable burn for us. Mm-hmm. How do we get 18 to 24 months of runway?
Yep.
And we've just got to make some hard decisions now and hope that if we do it the right way, those employees feel good about how we did it and might come back when the demand resurgence optimization thing kicks in. And they'd be really proud to come back and work with the company. And then hopefully the impact on your end customer isn't such, or you communicate and work with them in a way that they'll stick with you. Or if they need to drop off for a couple of months till they figure out their business, they'll be some of the first to come back. So the decisions you make now, an Excel model is just numbers in an Excel model. It's really how you execute those changes in the real world and on a human level that'll allow you to ride the wave back up.
Amazing. Super insightful. Really appreciate you being here. Elliott Robinson from Bessemer Venture Partners. Thanks so much, brother.
Of course,
Good to
man.
see you.
All
Take
right,
care.